Hello, friends. It's Monday night.
And we're live with Sketchy Live Monday, the podcast. Woo-hoo. You get to the Sketchy Live art conversation, hot rod talk, all the business in the world kind of conversations that we're going to have here on Sketchy Live. We do drawing, we do podcasts, we do both. It's a podcast where we're drawing, kinds of stuff. I'm Giant Jalopy, hot rod artist, designer, and pseudo fabricator sometimes when I get a chance. And with me is my beautiful wife, head of security, shipping, president of the company, vice president, Harry Truman, Doris Day.
Here I am.
It's ItyB.
Hi, guys. You were in for a treat tonight. This has been a topic we've been discussing for quite a bit now. And
We've been discussing all kinds of varieties of customization, hot rods, things that you like. This is a kind of learning stuff for you a lot of times, and it's been a really great conversation with you guys out there, sharing your insights, your views, your points. We've got a great one tonight as far as stirring up some conversation.
yeah,
We really, really, really want some input. Guys like Scott Ferguson is a great example of that. Hello, Scott. But we're going to get to that. It's West Coast versus East Coast.
yes.
And what about the guys in between? Let's hear
Right.
about it tonight on Sketchy Live, the podcast. Giant Jalopy, ItyB. Hit it.
And we are back.
We're back.
guys.
Sketchy Live Monday, the podcast. Welcome to another great episode, another great topic tonight.
Mhm.
We're going to touch base with, I can't get my phone out of the way. My audio is picking it up. We're going to talk about some cool stuff. What we'd like to talk about tonight, a couple things, some updates as far as where we are with Rose, the Model A project, or 30 Model A. Things that I've learned, some new things that we're going through, stuff, situations, maybe some insights on that, some confessions from a guy.
Confessions of the hot water.
Confessions of a guy whose dream comes true type stuff. But the main topic of discussion tonight, as you saw in our little post there of what we're talking about tonight on Sketchy Live, the podcast, a conversation about customization. Here's the topic: East Coast style versus West Coast style.
How do you do it?
And-
Is it this?
That's West Coast. Yep.
And
you
then-
and you probably just now we're going to get killed.
This is East Coast?
I don't know if the East Coast has one.
Yeah.
That's hopefully the
We're
West
not
Coast
cool
was.
enough.
And of course, we can't leave out those in between. What about the folks in Detroit? The right snack dab, kind of snack dab in the middle. Is it snack dab or smack dab?
Smack.
Smack dab. I know.
Let's do a quick mic check because Lizzie said she can't hear us. So is
Really?
anybody else having a problem
Echo,
with
or it's just
audio?
me?
I don't hear any
Is there
echo.
any echo now?
I don't hear any echo.
It's not. We can hear an echo.
Guys, let us know if you can hear us.
Still have picture, no sound. And you're unmuted on all your platforms, right?
It said really choppy.
Well, that's awesome. Our mic is muted. Why does this say our mic is muted? It says mic is muted. Oh, my mic.
Yours is.
Okay.
Corey said it sounds great.
Okay.
Paul Marziani said breaking up. So I don't know. Howard said choppy still.
Yeah. Is that computer still on?
No.
Is your Wi-Fi off your phone?
Mhm.
I'm sure the Watson computer that's in the other room is probably dragging a ton of Wi-Fi. Let's see. As long as sound is good on Facebook, anybody on YouTube? Yeah. How about anybody? Anybody on YouTube?
Anybody.
Can you hear us?
Anyone.
Roger.
Still bad, Robert Spears said.
Didn't you just say it was good?
Mine sounds good. They must have flip phones, Chris Henry said. Okay. We're just going to run with it.
We're going to roll with it.
We don't know any other way to
We
go.
don't know how to do
So
any
let
other
me
thing.
let me introduce a couple people so we get on here. Steph Ferguson joining us, hey y'all, from Michigan, and we're going to be picking your brains, so don't go anywhere.
Yeah, you East Coasters or Midwesters, or let's hear it from you because we want to know East Coast, West Coast.
We've got Mike Hicks joining us, which we'll be seeing in a couple of months.
What, that Midwest?
So excited. I think this area is Midwest. Robert Spear joining us from New Jersey. We've got Howard Pierpont, 77 in Portland, Cloudy, Mineola, Texas.
Yeah, there's right. It's kind of smack dab in the middle, too.
Lizzie Daughtry is joining us. Paul Marciani, like I said, from Bradenton. Corey Siebert joining us. Let's see. Michael Allen joining us. Welcome. Let's see. Lizzie Daughtry is getting us from Ms. Butterfly 34. YouTube. Chris Henry. We've got George the Glass Man joining us from YouTube. So it is over there. Matt Williams, good evening, fellow gearheads.
What's going on, Matt Williams?
And Diane Kay said, hi guys, your sound is bad. Are you going to sketch tonight?
No,
we're doing a podcast tonight. I don't know why we're having a podcast.
That's why we talk about when we do podcasts or non-podcasts. It may be one of those, we might have to shut down one of our front-facing mics, I guess.
You know what? Maybe this. Remember this port?
Great. I'm like plugging the microphone in the middle of the show.
I plugged it back in. There is now. No sound at all.
Why would you unplug that?
Because I think it's the
no, I don't know why you would have unplugged that. We're in the middle.
Because it wasn't working.
Beth, you don't unplug it.
1 second. Let me just restart this.
Okay, hope that you can hear us. And now we got to wait for somebody who's updated in the comments because we just turned it back on.
How about now? Can you hear us?
You got to talk so they know.
Hello. Testing. Audio is back. Okay, good. All right. Is it still choppy? All's good now.
Oh my goodness.
Right. Okay, great. We've got Craig joining us, Jim Green joining us.
If you ever wanted to put yourself in a heart attack or any of that kind of stuff, do a podcast with the electronics. It's the best. I can recommend it. It really cuts into the stress thing.
You said it sounds way better.
Okay, good deal.
We're back.
Anyways, tonight's topic, Sketchy Live, the podcast, ItyB, Johnny Jalopy. No, wait, Johnny Jalopy, ItyB. We're talking about East Coast, West Coast customization. Really the flavors of those styles. Now, what's the problem with saying that statement? That's always been the big debate, right? East Coast, West Coast. When it comes to styling and hot rodding, I think they're forgetting there's a bunch of people in the middle.
Yes.
What is their style like? We got a huge family in our Detroit area there. I'd love to hear you, if you're an East Coast person living on the East Coast, things that you've seen out East. What is the differences of what you've seen and what you like about the East Coast styling versus the West Coast styling? There's some definite differences in the way customized back in the early days of hot rodding, and the way things have changed to the way things are getting done now. Now, as guys are building traditional hot rods, they kind of stick to specific styling, and there's guys out west that will build the East Coast style hot rod because it's still a traditional style. So, what are your thoughts? We'd love to hear your comments. And of course, today ItyB and I went through some pictures and looked at different stuff. So I'm ready to hear. I can't wait to hear ItyB's opinion of what she saw, what she gained from the visuals of East Coast, West Coast. In fact, we kind of have a small model display of what kind of would be a good representation of East Coast versus the West Coast style hot rod.
So I love learning about this stuff, and I feel like I've learned so much along the way.
We'd also like to say we're not experts, and I'm not claiming to be an expert in either things or anything about this stuff. Me. We're in the culture. We're learning as well. We're learning all the time, so we want your input. So,
but I did look it up, and I learned a few things that I want to share with you. You probably knew about this. Hot rodding began in Southern California because I had asked Johnny, I'm like, where did it start? Was it East Coast that started it, or was it West Coast?
And again, that probably could be debated till the end of time as well.
Well, the resources that I found all showed it starting in Southern California
as a cultural
in the 20s and 30s. So dating as far back as that. And it said that the hobby increased after World War II. When did you say that?
1945 is when World War II officially ended.
When the soldiers returned home with tech training, which makes so much sense.
So just to stop you right there, so think about this. So when we think of like a used car that a young kid would buy, starting now, so 2024, how many years would you go back that you would say that's probably the affordable car that a guy could get for a couple $1,000s? What year would you say that the car probably would be?
Maybe a 2004.
Okay, so how many? That's almost 20 years. So do the math. 40 at the end of 40, do 20 years back, which is what? 1920s, 1930s, right? So it makes total sense why they gravitated towards the 30s Model A's, late 20s Model A's and T-buckets and stuff like that to start the hot rod portion. Now we're not talking about specifically like customs and stuff like that, because then we get into the 40s and 50s cars that were done in a completely different way. We're talking specifically just the hot rod 30,
the beginning
20s,
of the era. Yeah.
20, we can go 18, 20s, 30s into 40s cars. Okay, yeah, keep going. I just want to put that in perspective.
What I thought was really interesting when I read it is that this hobby was considered a cult movement. And I mean, I think of cults now, and it's usually based on like religion, right?
Sure. Well, so I mean, it becomes a religion.
This to be,
hot rod is a religion.
Yeah. For this to be considered a cult movement, but and what made it a cult movement? Because it was outside the ordinary. Why would you take a perfectly good car and chop it up?
So think about
do all that
when you take that in the respects of where you're saying a cult, kind of religious-y kind of things. Here were guys doing something that was not ordinary and doing things out of the box where the people who were like, why would you do it? That's unsafe and it's very loud and it's, oh my, what are you doing to it? Kind of things that happen with religion, right? Where people are like, how can you believe that? Type stuff. So, and hot rodding is definitely has a lot of similarities to religious aspects. There is a book of specific rules and things like that you got to follow, and if you fall outside those things, you can get some trouble for it. And especially if you're building a traditional hot rod versus what we now consider rat rods or out of the box kind of customs. Keep going.
And then
let's take some of the comments here.
I thought what was cool too was Robert A. Peterson launched Hot Rod Magazine in 1948, which was just after the war. And I didn't even put two and two together that this guy who did the magazine was the same guy.
I believe it's the Peterson Museum. It's St. Peterson. Yeah, I believe, and I could be wrong. I'm pretty sure. We might be able to look that up on our supercomputers. But think about here's a guy back in the 40s, right? That's when I said it started.
48 was when he.
So here's this cult.
He probably saw it coming and thought, let's put this in print.
Guys coming back from war, they're all their skill sets, and they're like, listen, we've been through a bunch of stuff. Fearless. Let's race these things. Let's make them go quicker. Let's make them go faster. Let's see how fast we can get them to go. All those things with no fear because they have been just through hell. and coming back with zero fear. Men being and
Not to
ladies.
mention, they would have been taught, hey, this Jeep just blew up. We need to do some body work on this and get it fixed.
Think about all the machining and different.
Yeah.
This is where all your now famous part companies and different things, guys that were machining and building things on the fly to make things go faster and look cooler, and modifying different things because they have this. They're like, shoot, I just made this P-51 Mustang out of scraps and kept it flying, or this B-29 bombers continue to do air assaults because we figured out how to make this little bracket to keep that wing stand stable and all this kind of stuff on the fly.
I just would not have thought that the military guys with their training would come home and be the first hot rodders.
Well, again, think about what they. This is the part that sometimes we forget, right? So think about what they saw World War II. I just watched the movie Fury. Like, holy cow, you just really you forget. We live in such a modern age of, even in our modern age of, I think as civilians, sometimes we forget there's the things that people go through when they go into the military, but they come back with skill sets that they want to utilize. And a lot of our most smartest and ingenuity guys with ingenuity and inventors and entrepreneurs are generally those that came from those backgrounds because they have a skill set that they can now utilize to do. They don't need someone to do for them; they will do for themselves, kind of thing. So hot rodding started in that respect, which was guys coming back going, "We've been flying fast our whole lives. This whole time, we made it. How do we celebrate? Well, I'm faster than you. I can make my car faster than you. Will you make your car faster than me? Do you think you can make your car faster than me? Yeah.
Well, was the customization back then with hot rodding really about the engine, or was it more the body?
I think it was everything. I mean, I didn't live back then, so I'm assuming based on pictures and things that we see, they weren't. I mean, they were taking 32 Fords and 29 this and 30 that, and getting them as streamlined as possible. And again, think about those were 20-year-old cars that had been sitting around for 20 years with, people were throwing them away.
Insane.
Guys were buying cars for $50, $25, and turning them into these really cool street machines and not just street machines, but, in the West Coast, they were taking them out to the Bonneville salt flats and seeing how fast they could go. And that's really where it started. Not that we've been racing. We were early racing back in the 1800s.
Yeah.
As soon as the vehicle could move, since we made vehicles, we've been racing. I mean, they were racing chariots. Man has wanted to make sure that he could beat the other guy in some respect.
So Jim Green
I don't mean
said,
that in a sexist way. I'm just saying that's.
Jim Green said, "How about lake pipes, Zoomies pipes?" So was that part of it? Was that part of the difference between West Coast?
Well, that definitely, I think, Lex pipes and different things like that becomes a if you look at those early salt flat racers, they had really extended exhaust that would come all the way back across the body. Mm-hmm. And I think early 50s and 40s customizers, as they were building lead sleds and stuff like that, started pulling those exhaust pipes and saying, "Hey, let's put them on these cool, drop machines too," and made it cool look and sound cool. And again, there's where the difference is in sometimes hot rodding versus customization when you're building like a custom 50s car or something to that effect, a cruiser, where you're not necessarily going for speed, you're going for the look,
right?
Which is how loud does it sound and how cool does it look? Look, Bob Frizz shared with us how he got into throwing flames out the back of his car, because it looked cool.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't make the car go faster. In fact, it made the car a whole lot more dangerous, but it looked cool. So when he pulled up to the burger joint at the night and all the girls are hanging out with all the dudes with the really hot rod fast cars, here comes Bob in his super cruisy car, but throws, 20 foot flames. That girl goes, "Oh my God, did you see that?
Oh my God, he's on fire."
Yep.
Dangerous.
And Bob's been getting girls ever since.
Jim Green said rear deck speaker cover organ pipes.
Yeah, there's so much different accessories that came out of hot rodding and customization. But tonight we're talking really that West Coast, East Coast flavor. So, when you look at the models in front of us. So what was the biggest differences between the East Coast that you saw that we talked about?
It was the rake, you called it?
Yep. So the stance is everything, and in any of it, customization or hot rod, stance is everything.
And then you talked about the way West Coast would be more likely to chop a vehicle, whereas East Coast would be more likely to channel the vehicle and drop it down, and that's how they would get it lowered over the
great example
over the frame.
So the one in front of us is actually chopped and channeled, right? This guy over here,
the white one.
Yeah. So let me see if I can share my screen, and so keep it on us for right now. But I'm going to share a screen of a great example of if it'll let me. Hopefully it will.
Howard Pierpont said returning servicemen and motorcycles too. We did talk about that as well.
Yep.
Motorcycles for sure. We've got Mike Williams joining us from Tuscaloosa.
I want to try to find that really great picture of a super great example of an East Coast car.
Jim Green said theme cars like Red Baron West or Midwest. He said, how about bomber seats? I mean, it's making sense to me now that these are war things, like the bomber seats. Like
a lot of them, it's why in traditional hot rods, you start seeing a lot of those things. Because they became so common.
Paul Marziani said, being from Philly, I saw a lot more performance.
Can you see my screen? Or
no. Brian Bentley joining us from North Little Rock, Arkansas. Welcome. Jim said it seems East Coast was more function and West Hollywood form. Okay. Yep, I'm seeing.
I don't know what this. You see that picture now?
Yeah.
There's a great example of East Coast hot rod. Although this one looks like it might be chopped a little bit, but look at the heavy channel on this car. That car has been. That's like, gosh, that looks almost like 8-9 inches of channel. There's a little bit of modifications. This is maybe a perfect example. You can tell it's too because it's got fenders. So there's a little bit of modification. The 32 Ford grill shell has been shortened a little bit. So it does look like it's got a little bit of a chop, but that's a heavy channel. And that's a
you're saying the frame is where that front bar is followed back.
So if you see where my cursor is, that is the frame.
Wow. So that really is.
So think about that car sitting stock height right now. There's no modification. It's running the regular straight axle on the front. The axle hasn't been dropped. It's probably dropped still. It's probably still running the regular. Maybe he's done some modification to the rear spring. We're talking pretty stock height, but now in order to make that car look super low, that guy's probably about 5'7", 5'8", and look how low that car is.
Yeah.
And then that's our from the other day.
That's good.
There's 4-door model. So there's a great example of just a traditional highway roadster, where it's sitting over the top of the frame rails. I'm trying to find. I mean, there's Tweety Pie. It's Ed Roth's, and that's a California built car.
Right.
There's some heavy rake on that. That's probably an East Coast car. Here's the California Kid. Great example of fendered car, chopped, not channeled at all.
Right.
Big and littles. There's a rake to it. Look at the stance of that car.
Yeah.
Dropped axle. Well, the axle's not heavily dropped, but there's probably a drop axle on that. But that is a classic West Coast hot rod.
And so the whole premise behind lowering it, other than aesthetics, because you were sharing with me about like these salt flats guys would take them out there and they'd want to be as close to the ground as possible.
Think about again. So building a race car for the salt flats, which is where hot rods started, right? So they're trying to go as fast as they can with the least amount of wind resistance. That's why they loved, the wedge style of the 30s car. And as you got into the 34s and different stuff like that, you would get like I believe this is a 34 with a track T nose on it. So it's a nose that's almost like off an Indy race car that's much more rounded and pointed. Again, think of the guys coming back and they're looking at war planes and the way they're shaped.
The aerodynamics
of all that stuff. is they're going, how can I build my car to represent what an airplane looks like?
And a lot of those Saltspats cars look like little bombers. Really?
Yeah. There's a pretty
cute.
Yeah, that's awesome, isn't it? That's a very East Coast. So here's East Coast styling. Now, whether it's heavily channeled or not, it does look like it's probably channeled pretty good. But that's a great example. No chop, and the frame, the body is sitting on frame rails, so it appears that it's way lower without chopping the body.
We've got Chris Smolinski joining us. Welcome.
So yeah, let's get some feedback. What people are thinking.
Hicks said it's because we're Americans and how we want freedom. Hot rods are everywhere. Mr. Dan Baldwin joining us from CD, a balmy 100 degrees currently in Casa Grande. Diane said, Ray says it's the frame, Johnny. We've got Shaggy joining us. Shaggy. We miss you. Hope all's well up in Michigan. So he can probably lend some information because he's been in this culture for a long time.
Yeah, and again, that's the part, again, as we're talking about these differences in West Coast, East Coast design and styling. And again, not saying that guys out West weren't kind of seeing some East Coast cars when they go to the shows, because guys were driving to get them in these big shows to win awards and stuff.
Right.
And you start seeing the differences in the two designs. And guys out West were like going, ooh, I really like how they channeled, which is why you start seeing the influences of channeling happening out West. And then you go out East and guys go, oh, I want to chop and channel. Then you got guys who start doing crazy stuff. They were sectioning. And then now we're getting it really crazy. We're adding all the different elements.
Right.
But there's a great picture of like a 30s Model A. Super awesome, big and littles. Got a great rig too. That actually looks like maybe like the 20s, almost. Man, it might be 30. So there is Rose. What do you see as the biggest modification on that?
Just the big and littles.
Really? There's about a 3 to 4 inch chop right there.
Oh, in the shop. Yeah. And the front of it doesn't look as long, or maybe it's just the way this photo is.
It's the angle. And again, that's it's so deceiving when you look at the car itself. It looks so much longer until you look at it from different angles. Yeah. And it's really not that big of a wheelbase.
We've got Cameron McNulty joining us. Welcome. We love you, daughter, out in Wyoming. Corey Siebert said lowriders with custom paint, definitely West Coast, and lots of customizers are still doing it. Movies cars from the West, some that are East started in the West, like we just said. Jim Pollan joining us, everyone, from Lobo's Hot Rod Garage, where it says New York, East Coast all the way. He's a fan. I hear you.
Yeah.
I'm an East Coast girl, but I like these West Coast hot rods, though. I like it. I think it's really cool.
I mean, what is your favorite? So you guys out there, and again, love to hear. And again, I think as Detroit is chiming in our Midwest and in our middle of the state, I bet you those guys. I mean, that's really where the dawn of the muscle car came from. Detroit, Michigan, is that it was like, oh, you got your hot rod.
Listen, you want fast? We got fast.
We're building engines. We're again, and these are coming out of the factory fast. Now we're building hot rods out of the factory as we get into the 60s and 70s.
Jim Green said, what is viewers' feedback on straight axle, gasser, redistribute weight, load on takeoff?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a whole nother version too as we start getting to the drag strips. The guys up. It's where the transition starts happening. So as I'm sure people saw that the Bonneville salt flats are going off, and it's about speed, top speeds, and those kinds of things. Then we start getting into actual drag racing, right? In the quarter mile from one place to another.
Totally different.
Then we start building these cars. How can we take these hot rods and then drive them so they'll win at the drag strip? Then there's the dawn of the gasser, which is shifting the weight to get more traction, bringing the straight axle, getting the front nose up, so that the transition from when takeoff happens.
So these other cars were nose down, and now we're looking at the gasser.
It was about streamline. So the gasser was about grip.
Yeah.
Getting the tires and that horsepower to the rear tires to the street, where the salt flats was I got so many miles to go as fast as I can get it to go.
That's a bucket list place for me.
The Salt Flats?
Have you been?
Never.
Oh,
I always wanted to.
is it a bucket list?
Of course.
Let's do it.
Of course. Well, it's not as easy as said. It's easier said than
Why?
done.
They don't just let anybody in?
Well, I think there's some things you got to do, but it's
to
possible.
Be a spectator?
I don't know. It's not really. I don't know how much of a spectator thing it is. I think you got to be in it.
Oh. Corey Siebert said Midwest is lots of pro street stuff, tubbed cars.
Right.
Okay, so our buddy Scott from Michigan. I never really followed the East versus West Coast. When I built mine, I just kept cutting until it looked right to me. Chopped channels and section looked just right on my beater.
And that's the thing. So, Scott Ferguson's a great example of where, not that what he has is not a hot rod, because it all falls under the umbrella of hot rod. Right. Mm-hmm. But what I think Scott Ferguson has is a true custom.
Oh,
that is it, and there's where the transitions in between probably West Coast, East Coast, and as we get into Michigan things, where West Coast maybe some of those customs weren't necessarily worried about going fast. Mm-hmm. The guys from Detroit were probably building their 59 Mercs and their 50, all those things, 49 Mercs, 49 Mercs and things, not only low, but they were not slow. They still wanted to be able to go fast too. So there's, again, it's the flavor of where you came from and different stuff like that that's what's so beautiful about the hobby itself, the cult.
The cult, if you will.
But let's go back to what it is now, what we call it, which is it's a culture. It's the hot rod culture.
Sure.
It's the culture of it.
Do you hear how cult is in that word?
Oh, of course I do.
Great. I'm just now putting that together.
That's why it's spelled with a K if it's correct.
Oh.
Culture. So, again, going back to the original question, ItyB, when you look at the design, and again, we can throw in the as what kind of Scott has there as a true custom as well. What is the flavors of now that you've had some years of experience? I know we talk about this all the time. Like for instance, if I handed you the keys to Rose and said, "Here's a Model A Ford, 2-door sedan," and here's where we get into where we started the topic of here's the dilemma that Johnny's going through right now. What do you do? What would you do? Because there's this big hot rod culture. What I am now learning, there's this whole other people, groups, thousands of people who have these old 20s and 30s cars that are working their butts off to keep them like they were built back in the 20s and 30s, and really living the love of where our most beautiful cars came from.
Well, we had this discussion the other day because I said to you, Kona, when we got her, was a rat roddy type of vehicle already. Sure. So for you to chop it and do what you did to it, it wasn't as big of a deal because it's still rat roddy.
Okay, but traditionalists in the Volkswagen community would go, you just cut up a perfectly good 66 body that you could have easily got fenders for and restored it back to 1966.
Sure.
When 66 bodies are very rare.
Oh, I did not know that. I did not know that. So maybe you did an oopsie on that one.
Well, I'm just saying, so you go back, I think the mid 50s to late 50s into the 60s is where the VW started. So
yeah,
they were making them, and they're making a lot of them, and it's all the imports are coming in and stuff like that. But the Volkswagen community itself, traditionalists of that who are about stock or even would go, why would you cut that up?
If it was, when we got it, it was already, front was already stretched, it was already fenderless.
Sure.
So
all of it,
there were already some things done.
All the things that were done to it could have easily been removed and put right back to a factory 66 or at least a styled 66 vehicle without losing any of its characteristics of a VW.
Sure. But you bought it because it looked a certain way. and we continued working on it
Mhm.
in with your vision.
Yep.
Rose, on the other hand, is
Tough call.
it's not, because it's a finished product already.
Oh, no, still tough call.
It's not a tough
It's
call.
very tough.
Not for me. If you handed me the keys, I might do what you did with the wheels. I agree with you.
Well, see,
Big and little.
but again, so hold on. Just by you doing that, the purist over at the Model A, it's the Model A Ford
Lovers.
No, Model A
Lovers.
Ford Club of America would go, okay, you changed the wheels. Why? Why did you do that? Because that car came with 19-inch wheels. You've now modified it, and it really feels like us over here are going to see another 30s Model A go way of the hot rod, because you put 16-inch wheels on it, which is and big and little tires. You're going to hot rod that thing, aren't you, Johnny?
Yeah, that's where you're headed. It's where you're headed.
Well, what you're saying is you're like, I'm not going to.
I wouldn't.
We've already done it.
I wouldn't shop it.
We've already done it. We've already made the steps to where people could easily. Now, I've seen some other cars, which is interesting. I've seen some in this Model A Ford Club of America pictures where everything's still stock height. Those deals, they haven't done big and littles. They just went to regular 16-inch and a certain size black wall or a white wall tire. So the stamps, the tires the same size, all that kind of stuff. And people are okay with it because they're like, oh, you know, let's say you had a car and all it was available for you was you had bent a rim or something like that, and there were no Model A 19s available, so you grabbed what would fit, which would have been a 30s 40s Ford wheel. So I get it, okay. Or the times where like it was 16-inch tires was all that was available, so I had to go with these 16-inch wheels. Okay, they would go, okay, we might be able to buy that. But the fact that I have big and little tires, they all know, okay, we're going to lose another one to hot rods.
Well, it depends on how far you want to take it. Your intent in getting this, I think a couple of years ago, like you said, would have been to chop the heck out of it and do it full hot rod. I don't think that you have that same vision for this car. I think your taste have changed a little bit as far as now that you have it, and I think if you were to buy one that was hot rodded already, that would have been what you were looking for, is what you always wanted to do to it. But now that you have this one,
it's tough.
It is tough. And I agree. I don't want to lose some of it.
Here's what's happening to me. The more I keep learning, here we go. We're getting into, and then I'd like to read some more of these great comments that are coming in. This is great. The confessions of a hot rod guy. The more I keep learning about the history of the Model A Ford, and the more I keep learning stuff from these pages and YouTube channels that are dedicated to guys keeping it factory, and the some of it's a little overboard. It's the passion. So I filter through and I see the passion in it.
Right.
It makes me go, I can't not respect what they're doing, because it is such an American icon, a vehicle.
Right.
It is really the Model T, the Model A, those cars is really what got America moving into what we are now. People started being able to travel. People started being able to move families. People started merchandise and commerce and all those kinds of things happened because of that car. And the fact that there's still so many of them out there,
people have worked to preserve them
under the power of the original design with no modification. There are some that have been modified to some newer technologies and still are what they are. But we're talking about guys where they've kept it as factory to specs as they can, and that car is still able to perform for the intent
100 years later.
For the intent it was built. And that old, it's hard to lose it's hard to not respect that and go to fall into the love of that.
Preserve
that
history.
cult, which is, man, because when I get behind the wheel and I start that thing up and I go through the whole process and I drive it and I get going and I hear the wonky little four banger, every time I drive it, I fall more and more in love with what it is. And there's where there's where I go, gosh, it would be a shame, because this would be another one that where the preservation of that goes away. But then this little guy over here, he's stinky, and he smells. That guy. Yeah, 5-inch chop on that thing would look sick. Yeah, big and little. Lower it and get it low. All those. That's the voices that are over here going, yeah, but think about how cool it could be, man. Think about how cool it could be.
Jim Collins said they are only original once. They are custom forever.
Yeah, it's true.
It is true. We've got Kalman Carisi joining us. Welcome. Glenn Evans said, stockish baby.
Stockish.
Mr. Danny Baldwin, I believe in freedom. If you own the car, it's your call, whether you keep/restore it to original or customize it, for sure. Scott Ferguson said, haha, my poor 37 was all original until I cut it in half. As cool as it was, it's nothing but a museum piece. Unsafe to drive in modern traffic and unreliable as well. I'll build it to put a smile on my face and actually drive it.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I get that.
Yeah. Frank Capello joining us, ahoy mateys, watching you from the Celebrity Cruise Ship Reflections. I can see you guys just fine. Why would you be tuning in on
Dude, you're on a cruise. Go get a burger for me and some soft serve.
And you know what? We've never even been able to afford the Wi-Fi on the cruise.
Hit that piano bar and have a cocktail on me. Thanks for watching, buddy.
Kai Parker joining us. Dude, you make me want to build another rat rod. Yes.
Well, see, all this talk of traditional is making you want to build. That's awesome.
Lucky Stripe said, keeping it stock gives you a reason to buy another one to chop. And I was going to say the same thing, because it would be like some of the ones you were looking at getting were maybe a couple $1,000s less in a position where they were projects.
Here's what's happening. Because I'm a car guy, I don't stop looking for the next other thing, right?
Next best thing.
So I'm looking online and I'm looking at all these 29, 38,
because we have a car out there for sale.
Well, hold on. I'm just saying, because now I've learned some stuff about them, like, oh my God. But as I look at them, I'm like, oh my gosh, man, I could get that thing running, and that would be this old 29. And oh man, it's in worse shape than Rose. And how cool would that be? I could get that thing running. You know what I mean? There's all these little, anyways, it's the hard part. So here's what's happening for me. Impressions of a guy now owning his dream is everything in me wants to make it cool and hot rod. But everything in me keeps looking at all the coolness of the factory stuff that Henry Ford made, and it wants to respect that too. And that's the hard part I am dealing with, because again, I asked one question on the Ford Model A Club of America page about lubrication and stuff, because the factory Model A is 82 different points of lubrication that you got to do, right? Every couple 500 miles or some shit. And this car hasn't been lubricated correctly in the longest time. So I'm like trying to figure out, what do I need to lube? What's the right ones? All this different stuff. And there's a huge amount of people telling me this and that. And then one guy who's on the board of directors contacts me and says, hey, Johnny, here's what you need. Here's what it is. Gives me the full rundown, why and where, what and when, how to get it, where to get it, why I need it, what the differences are, the technical breakdowns of it, all this amazing information, to where I'm like, I got to read that like 9 more times to understand what you just wrote. And we're just talking about lubrication, grease.
Yeah.
And then he goes, I was like, so he finally explains, shows me, I get it, gets me the right place. And now I know what I need to get, which is great, because I really want to go through the chassis and lubricate it, because it probably has never been in a long time hasn't been since we bought it. And looking at some of the stuff, It's been a while since it's been lubricated. But then I'm looking at, okay, gear oil there's a specific type of gear oil you got to use in this specific type of trans oil. And every 500 miles, you got to do that. Every 500 miles, you got to do an oil change. It's a Babbitt bearing. And the fact that those 100-year-old bearings are still firing and that car is still running and running pretty good-ish, other than the fuel stuff. But that ain't about how the engine was designed, right? Still running, get me down the road, moving pretty good on its own power.
Yeah.
And I'm going, holy cow! And the guy's like, you know what? There's a lot of information to give you over the internet. Why don't you just call me?
Wow.
I'm like, what? The guy's like, yeah, I'd love to share with you. There's another Model A out on the road. Someone trying to figure out how to do this. I'd love to share with you this information. I can't say that. And this is the thing. Maybe I just got lucky with the person I got in contact with. I can't say every single hot rod person would share that information so quickly.
Right.
I've met people who listen, our family from Detroit have been amazingly great, supportive people with tons of information and shared tons of stuff.
They have.
Right? The people along the way that we've met have been very gracious. But just meeting Joe, sometimes they're a little leery about giving information. And is it right? You know what I mean? So it's interesting. There's the part where there's the confession. It's kind of, these guys are making me fall in love with the stock version. I'm still going to hot rod. I can't help it. Big and littles, baby. I want it low and I want it to look cool.
Kai Parker said, "Make cars cool again and fun." Too much of the car scene is so much of the same nowadays. People seem to stick to a cookie cutter kind of car and stick cookie cutter rims on it just to make it the same as everyone else's.
Well, and to that comment, there's things that work. That's the hard part. And there's those guys that are giving nod to the traditions of how it was done before, and I appreciate that. But I agree with you. Sometimes, we get into trends. Look, let's go back to, if we'd have been doing this podcast, which they'd have been like, "What are you doing in the '90s? That's a radio show."
Yeah.
Right. But if, let's say we go back to the 80s or early 90s, mid 90s kind of time, when we were talking about street rods, that's a totally different thing than we're talking about today.
Yeah.
Street rod. Are you familiar with that terminology?
I am not necessarily.
What do you think that means?
Racing cars that were on the road that you would race were street rods. It's not.
A street rod was the next iteration of the traditional hot rod, which is where in the times of the Boyd Coddingtons and Chip Fooses in the early days, and we're coming out of the Barris era, where cars started to become very smooth, shaving everything, and billet aluminum. Things started not being made out of steel anymore, and we were going to aluminum parts. And the billet aluminum movement came into play, where everything was billet. So it was billet everything, super shiny. Mm-hmm. Secondary portion of the street rod era was the flamboyant paint job that started coming out. It was the Easter egg era, which was cars that were teals with pinks, and a lot of pink cars, and a lot of bright yellows, and a lot of not even purples. And if it was a purple, it was a very bright Easter eggy purple. There was a lot of just almost. Let's go back to as we're coming out of the 80s. Remember all the neon colors and
the Madonna era.
The color palettes of those times started falling onto cars, and a lot of it became the street rod era. And that's where I fell in love with hot rods. For my age, I was like, oh, those are really amazing. They're so crazy and cool, and these really retro graphics and all kinds of crazy stuff on these cars. And they were so shiny, and every rim was just amazingly bright, and all the chrome, but it wasn't chrome, it was billet aluminum and all this stuff. but as I've learned and got into the culture and actually started learning from the guys, I was like, you can't beat a car built back in the 40s or the 50s, where they didn't have aluminum. It was steel. And a lot of guys couldn't afford chrome. The only chrome pieces you got off were other cars that had chrome. That's where you got chrome pieces. The high-end guys could afford to get things re-chromed.
Well, I remember when we first got Raquel, trying to stop that thing. I remember driving it.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God, I have to like start stopping, half a mile back if I want to stop this car in time, because it was such a heavy car. And you explained to me then, you're like, you're driving a Hyundai. It's plastic, basically. It was fiberglass.
Yeah, the technology. But as we got into those early cars, the street rod days, which again, it was a time in which cars were built that way when there were thousands of hot rods built that way. And there are probably people who are listening to this that maybe owned them or knew people who owned street rods. And they're still around. You still have street rod, the good guys and all those clubs. It's a street rod nationals and all that kind of stuff. It's still a movement that's happening now. And there's a lot of good ones and a lot of bad ones,
Scott said pastel exterior, tweed interiors.
Very much so, very much so. But it was a trend. It was a trend that fortunately has kind of gone by the wayside, because what came out of that trend is the normal thing, right? You have the trend, and what do you usually have? The rebellion against the trend. And then that's when you started seeing, back in the early 90s, up in Paso Robles in California and different places, where guys were now purposely, it's kind of just like during the 80s and 90s, it was grunge and all that kind of stuff. And what came out of that early 80s was punk rock, the anti-Madonna. What came out of grunge, heavy metal, Metallica, and those kinds. It was the anti-Nirvana, or I can't even think, I didn't like those grunge bands anyways, but like what was the most popular one? Eddie Vedder. I can't think of the name. What the hell is it? That's how good they were. I can't remember the name.
I don't know.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
But that era, San Francisco. Anyway, there's always the answer. So what happened in those, as we're coming out of that street rod days, then the traditional hot rod, young guys were like, I don't want to do that when my dad's doing $100,000 hot rod. I'm going to go find me a 32 Ford, and I'm going to build it like the guys did back in the early days. And that's when the movement of traditional hot rods started building it back up again.
Pearl Jam.
Yeah. There's always an anti to the thing. So
Lucky Stripe said, he's tuning in from YouTube, you won't find that with the MARC guys. I'm not sure. Model A.
MARC.
Model A.
I'm sure it's Model A, something of the
Restoration Club, maybe?
I don't know.
And then he said MAFCA, MAFCA, Model A.
The one, I'm trying to think of the guys I'm talking to.
He said those people are always willing to share, but the Mark guys are not. I don't know what the difference is.
The MAF guy, I think the gentleman was from the Model A, the Model A Ford Club of America was pretty much.
So that's the MAF.
Yeah, and the gentleman was very nice.
Yeah,
and even the guy. Listen, can I just say this? I've been watching. Someone told me. Remember back? Someone mentioned this name, Paul Shin. Model A expert on YouTube. Yeah. I've been watching a crap ton of his videos. And I commented on a few of them, like, oh man, this is great information. And he commented, hey John, cool. Glad to see you in the hobby. Any questions I can help? I asked a few questions. Right there, answered the questions I had. And and then he says to me, please don't hot rod it.
Oh.
I'm like, I couldn't respond back, because I'm like, I can't guarantee anything.
All right.
But what I can tell you, I'm torn right now. Ish. Because right now, because my vision, yeah. But I can see where, I'm sorry to keep cutting you off. I can see where people start adding more modern brake system, engine that will go a little
for safety,
more, and reliability, because I want to be able to drive it.
Kai Parker said, "You're on about the pastel cars that were dubbed cow lookers in Street Machine back in the day."
Yeah. And listen, I guess it's probably never going to happen for me, but I had this great idea for an automotive car building show, and it's where we basically go in, and I shared this with the producer too, and if it happens, all I can say is I'm glad because I would watch it, where we go and we find basically garage hidden, or maybe not even garage hidden, but we buy, because here's where the budget would be hard. We go buy what is considered a
Spit it out.
I just forgot the name of it. We're just talking about it. Street rod. We go find a street rod. Sorry, and we take all the silliness off of it, and we make a traditional hot rod out of it. I think that would be a cool show.
What would you call it?
Making it cool again, or something like that. Back from the lame, or making it cool again. I think would be cool.
We've got Michael stopping by. Welcome.
And again, nothing. Those guys that can afford those street rods are.
Mark, the MARC was Model A Restorers.
Okay.
So there's the difference between that and then the Model A.
They would definitely be less likely to give any advice other than to restore, and then that's again even that. And I've watched a few videos from those kind of guys too. The guys that are killing me is the ones that are like, it's a barn find, hasn't been running 40 years, sitting in this barn. And I know it's used to.
Started it right up.
And they battle to get it running, and then they drive it like 500 miles. There's a guy that drove one like 700 miles. And I'm over here going, I'm just trying to get it around the block. And I'm afraid
I had to breakfast.
That's all I want to do. Which I keep today went out there. I'll give you this. This is about what I love about the car. I went out there, fired right up. No hesitation. Started right up, backed right out, went out the driveway, 2 or 3 trips around the block. No issues.
That's what we want to hear. Matt Williams said, Iron Trap Garage is a YouTube channel that specializes in traditional hot rods.
Yes, love that channel. Those guys are doing cool stuff over there. Shout out to Iron Trap Garage. Those guys are really cool.
We're at an hour.
Already?
Yeah. Didn't that go fast?
We didn't. I don't feel like we touched on anything.
We talked about West Coast versus East Coast.
Did we get anywhere? Did anybody say what they... Hey, real quick, jam us with the comments because there's only 17 people. You 17 people, West Coast, East Coast. Or would you say you guys in the middle?
Are you asking what their preference is?
Yeah. What's your flavor? So if you could choose ItyB, what's your flavor?
I like the West Coast stance.
You like a little bit of a rake.
Yeah, and I do like it. I do like them chopped. I don't know if I would do that on ours, but when I see a chopped vehicle, I like it. And I didn't really understand the channeling thing until you explained it to me. I think I prefer the chop because for me, the lowering of the window, that's what makes it for me. Like that's what I find really appealing is the smaller window. Like if we were to channel rows, just drop the whole thing down, sure, it gets lower, but the window to me still looks way too high.
So when you look at the differences between Kona then and Kona now, you like
yes.
And what is the look? Why is that? Because it just looks. I don't want to put words in your mouth. Yeah, what is it about
it? It's a little meaner. It's flatter. It just looks better. I don't even know.
Yeah.
It just looks better.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. So for me, if I had, if I could choose, it probably would be a little bit of both. But my vision for Rose, our Model A, our 30 Model A, Tudor. Mm-hmm. My vision is I'm falling in love with the big and littles, low, where the wheels are tucked in the fenders, and no chop. And it just looks clean.
Yeah.
And it still has a hot rod feel to it. It just looks clean, but you can tell it's not stock.
Something's been done.
Something's done with it. It's just the stance itself. The stance. I'm with you. There's a rake to it, and it looks good. So I'm taking the East Coast of non-chop, West Coast stance. Tuck those wheels.
Now you did talk
Let's do
about
this.
lowering it.
That's tucking the wheels. We're tucking the wheels up into the fenders as much as we can without them rubbing.
Okay, so you're not modifying the body to do that.
Not yet. Not yet.
Paul Marziani said East Coast muscle cars.
Yeah.
Kai Parker said body chopped or just roof chopped.
Yeah, that's body chop would be channeling.
And then he said the gene look. He calls it the gene look.
Gene chop and channeled.
Great eye.
And and sectioned a lot of times too.
Yeah.
And you learned what sectioning is.
Yes.
Yep.
Now, I want to give a shout out to Ian and Jamie about this new shirt they dropped.
Yeah.
New shirt design.
Super cool. The
done by yours truly here.
Space Junkie 1.5. The Jeremy Jones version is out at their go to their YouTube page, and they've got, I forget where they're
I don't know where they're selling it at, but
it's on their YouTube page. You can get to it. In fact, their Facebook, they've been posting stuff for where you can buy them, and it is a collaboration between them and me, and which is great. And so excited from our work that we did for Inktober, and more collaborations to come. Ian just kind of wrapping up a Doom buggy for himself, and I did a rendering of a kind of caricature toony thing of him and Jamie out in the desert running around in that. I can get that inked up for them so they can get that on the t-shirt. It's just so happy to be involved still with such a great dude. If you haven't checked it out, Ian Russell's page there on YouTube, it is amazing. Today it was a great episode that they just dropped. Not to be a spoiler alert, but if you watch Ian really, really, really learning a new technique in his all his skill set of moving metal around and mastering metal, he is challenging himself. And I watched him, and it made me go, dude, this is why I love watching what you do, because he's real. He's never been a bullshitter. He's never been fake. You watch him manipulate metal and lose all confidence in what he's doing, but push through to where the end result is amazing. It's super cool.
Yeah.
So I recommend highly this new episode that they just dropped on his channel on YouTube. Go check it out. Great stuff. He's got other links to other great fabricators as well, and other shows and stuff. So go check that out. And of course, we appreciate you guys hanging out with us.
For sure.
JohnnyJalopy.com is still a place where you can get hat stickers and t-shirts from me on a sidebar or as a added thing. I know we're almost now, right? In the confessions of a guy with his dreams come true. I'd like to confess something on our channel right now. Oh. So over the course of the past few months since November, I've been struggling with some creativity. It's been very difficult to create new stuff in the midst of losing my mom. And we've continued to come here, Sketchy Live, continue to do some sketches. I don't think they've been necessarily my best, but they've been a little lackluster as far as the energies of creativity. I've been so fortunate that we've spent some time with the cars and doing different things like that. And so it's something I recognize. We talked about it yesterday, and it was great because I feel like I got that off my chest and things I've been thinking about. And I just want to let you guys know that be on the lookout, because I'm ready to come out both barrels blazing. Because I still have the memory of both my parents, who were very supportive in the artwork that I do. The reason why Johnny Jalopy isn't even a thing is because of the loss of my father. He was an artist who didn't believe in his abilities as an artist, and I vowed that I would sell art for him. And I realized something yesterday after talking to you is that I need to make that same vow to my mom, which was continue to make it happen and to continue to strive to get it done, because she was the first person always in my corner as my mom, saying, I just love what you do, kid. Keep it up. I'm so proud of you. Mm-hmm. So I can't let her down either. Mm-hmm. So Johnny Jalopy continues. Thank God for my wife, who continues to listen to me and encourage me as well. So thank you for yesterday. allowing me to vent on that and be real about it. But I just want to let you guys know out there, if you haven't seen new art come out or things feel a little wonky in some things, that's what's been going on with me personally. And this is how we are. We're real about things.
Yeah.
And this is the things you got to do when things come at you like this. You gotta focus in, share. People love you. You know, I know that what my faith is, that through all this, we've continued to have abundance in our life, continue to have great things happen in our life. It is not a time to sit and wallow. It is a time to stand and make stuff happen.
Yeah.
So, guys, we sure appreciate you guys hanging out with us.
And that being said, things aren't going to happen for about a week.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
we are.
That's my plan. When we get back, this is why this is a perfect time. This is why I'm so happy we talked about it, because I'm going to go spend time with family.
Yeah.
And I can't wait to spend time with your dad and get rejuvenated to where a parental figure that I hold in high regard is who's still with me. I can spend time with and feels the same way, and just can't wait to get back after that, recharged, ready to kick butt. Be on the lookout. New Giant Jalopy stuff going to happen. The podcast is going to continue. We're going to have more cool content. We're going to have guests on.
And we are going to try and do some lives while we're gone, because this Thursday,
yes,
we are scheduled to go, and I want to go live at the show.
Yes, we're going to be in New Jersey.
Some cars
there's
Thursday
a really
night.
Cool Thursday night cruise in right by where you right
the plaza where I worked at Foodtown as a teenager.
Yep. Who is our guest? Our Mark Kalowitz is going to be our host. Going to reintroduce us to the plan.
Yeah.
And we're so excited about hanging out with our East Coast family. So
yeah,
can't wait to see if you're one of those folks that are going to be out there. Can't wait to see you out there. Look for us. And thanks for hanging out with us through this hour, talking about hot rods, West Coast versus East Coast. And don't forget those amazing car builders in the middle. And of course, we love our family on Detroit. High five to you guys. And big shout out.
Ferguson is offering a phone call away if you need them.
I appreciate that, brother. And a big shout out to our great folks out there, Mike Hicks and Little Daddy Roth, and of course, Paul Marziani, and all you people out there. We love you guys. Thanks for hanging out with us. A fun conversation. I learned a lot. Did you learn a lot?
I learned a lot today. It was fun.
So we appreciate you, and we hope to see you again on our next episode in the lives. And go check out that website, johnjalopy.com. And as always,
stay sketchy, guys.
We'll see you guys.
Take care.
See ya.